That brings us to the lightweight interim title fight that headlines the first UFC event of the year. And it is between Justin, the human highlight reel, Gaethje. I think that's his nickname. The highlight reel? Whatever. Going up against Paddy the Baddie Pimblett. We got Gaethje coming in at plus 190 and the return on Pimblett coming in at minus 225. Now, I'll start off on the Gaethje side of things, who's only coming off of a win over Rafael Fiziev. So I know a lot of people were very much up in arms when Gaethje got this title fight again, but given the circumstances, given the lay of the land, given the UFC's marketing strategy, I understand why they're giving this shot to Gaethje. But, he's had plenty of title shots, plenty of spots where he ended up fumbling the bag. He won the BMF title against Dustin Poirier in the rematch. Then he got knocked out in that crazy matchup for the BMF title against Max Holloway at UFC 300. And then he had a short notice matchup against Rafael Fiziev last year. That was a fight where he was supposed to take on Dan Hooker. A late injury to Hooker brought Fiziev in from a pretty long layoff. I think that was his first fight after losing to Gamrot by injury. And then he had already beaten Fiziev in the past. So, he goes out there, does the same thing to Fiziev, makes it look a little bit more dominant, gets the win there, and now here he is finding himself in a title fight. He's 37 years old, so he's clearly past his prime, but he's still a very fun fighter to watch. He's going to be engaging of the pocket exchanges, looking to implement his boxing, looking to implement that pesky leg kick that he loves to put on his opponents. He has that wrestling if he needs to lean on it as well, but I don't think it's all that effective as it used to be earlier on in his career. He could utilize it defensively, but if he's facing strong grapplers, they'll probably be able to get him in bad spots and keep him there, or even find submissions the way that Charles Oliveira did. Gaethje's a fun fighter, entertaining fighter, and I think that's the main reason he finds himself in this spot, because I think all the spotlight and all the publicity is actually going towards his opponent here, Paddy the Baddie, who the UFC has been salivating to put him in a spot like this. And luckily for them, things have worked out perfectly where he can find himself in an interim title fight and possibly be the next person to welcome Ilia Topuria back to the cage whenever Topuria is ready. Now, Pimblett riding a crazy big winning streak right now, obviously coming into the UFC, highly touted, highly hyped. If you've been a fan long enough of the UFC and even Cage Warriors, you heard about Paddy the Baddie years and years ago. But he wanted to grow his name a little bit more with Cage Warriors, and he turned down a few contracts from the UFC and then eventually saw the opportunity when the time was right to get into the UFC. But after he initially turned down their contract, he did suffer a loss to Soren Bach after that. A lot of people were overlooking that. That was a fight where he got grinded out by a better grappler and had no answer for it. But Pimblett has gotten much better. He's clearly in his prime now, 31 years old, very strong, very big, too, for 155 pounds. There's a reason he doesn't fight as often as much of the top contenders, because he balloons up to such a big weight that not a lot of people... he's not willing to take short notice fights to begin with, but he brings that size advantage into these fights because he's gotten that weight cut down to a science where he can, be his healthiest, even though when he's cutting as much weight as he is, but he puts the weight back on. And that's why you often see him go out there and just be so physically imposing against his opponents. The way that he, ragdolled Michael Chandler and then eventually got that TKO finish. Even the King Green fight, that was one that had me scratching my head, where Green ended up shooting for the takedown, but I think it was like the pesky kicks from Pimblett. Like, he was landing a lot of unorthodox kicks that seemed to really frustrate Green, and I think Green's only solution was to try to take Pimblett to the ground, and that put him right into a submission, which is the bread and butter of Pimblett's game. You watch Pimblett's striking style, it's all unorthodox kicks from distance. He doesn't often throw his hands, but when he does, it's a little bit sloppy. It's a little bit off balance, but it's all to eventually set up a takedown or getting the fight into the grappling game and imposing his will with his strength, which is very hard for a lot of fighters at 155 pounds to keep up with. And that's where he gets those dominant positions and gets the better of his opponents. Here against Justin Gaethje, sure, Gaethje has a bit of a wrestling background, but I don't think he's ready to deal with the size and strength of Pimblett. Gaethje's best chance here is to try to box up Pimblett, land his leg kicks, stick and move, stay away from the clinch. But I think it's just a matter of time before Pimblett eventually gets his hands on him, eventually drags him to the ground and gets that submission. Pimblett, very, very good submission specialist, very strong with the grappling, and it's going to take some wear and tear on Gaethje. The total is currently set at 2.5. It was at 3.5. or if it was at 3.5, I'd be very interested in taking the under there, as I think this fight will eventually finish, and it's probably going to be Paddy. But it's going to take somewhere, just as it did against Michael Chandler. This will take maybe 2.5 rounds for Pimblett to break Gaethje down, and then once he gets him to the mat and sucks that wind out of Gaethje and just pulverizes him from that top position, I think it's going to get hard for Gaethje to get out of a bad spot. That'll give up a rear naked choke for Pimblett, and I think we see Pimblett get the finish. As 225, a little bit wide for my liking. I'll say that right off the bat. This is going to be Paddy's toughest test to date, but I think he's catching Gaethje at the perfect time. 37 years old, slowing down. Perfect fight for Pimblett to take advantage of the grappling advantage he should hold here against Gaethje. So, and new interim champion Paddy the Baddy Pimblett.